Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckcom. My next guest is Cyril White. Cyril knew George Floyd personally. Cyril was a basketball player in high school and college. He has spent roughly two-thirds of his adult life in China, where he is now a sports professional who takes basketball teams to China. He's also started a successful shoe brand and runs a basketball gym and a basketball program by the name of To God Be the Glory. That's To God Be the Glory, which you can find online at tgbtsports.com. Cyril, I want to get Cyril on the podcast for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons, obviously, is because he knew George Floyd, and I wanted him to talk a little bit about what George Floyd was like, so we can all keep in mind that this was a human being we're talking about. He's not a symbol. He's a human. And so Cyril talks about George quite a bit. I also wanted to have a discussion with Cyril about race relations in the country in general, and what it was like for him as a black athlete and a black professional in China, and also some of the things that Cyril's doing and that what we all can do to try to make the situation better for everybody. So Cyril has some really cool stories, and he has a lot of great ideas, and his ideas are about as timely as it gets right now. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I really enjoyed this one. And now I give you Cyril White. Now, hey everybody, it's Brian Beckcom, VB Attorneys. I've got my good friend Cyril White. I've already introduced Cyril, so you know a little bit about him. But one of the reasons I wanted to get Cyril on the podcast is because Cyril knew George Floyd and knows the family personally. And so we're going to talk about George during this podcast some because I think Cyril and I want people to know he was a real human being. He's not just a symbol. He was a person. And so we're going to talk about George quite a bit. But before we do that, how you doing, Cyril?
Man, everything's fine, Brian. Thanks for having me on, man. This is going to be a great show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're on the show. I mean, I remember after the shoot or the murder. I want to say shooting because so many times it's a shooting, but this was essentially a strangulation.
Right.
You texted me, I think it was the next day, and told me that you knew the family, and I was like, man, I got to get Cyril on the podcast to talk about this. So, but before we talk about that, Cyril, tell the folks listening a little bit about your background, where you're from, what do you do, kind of your work history and your history with Mr. Floyd.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm from Houston, Texas. I grew up in the South Side area. I went to Lamar High School, and right now I graduated from University of St. Thomas, and I've been working in China for over 20 years, taking basketball teams and athletes, sports personalities to China for sports exchange activities. Prior to that, with To God Be the Glory, I was doing basketball camps and college exhibition tours. That was the beginning of what led into the international activities. And that was the time that, we started to work closer with Mr. George Floyd, although I'd known him since high school days, as we were both coming up in Houston, Texas.
And he went to Houston Yates, right?
He went to Yates and I went to Lamar. So, those are somewhat rival high schools. And also being from the South Side, I was zoned to go to Worthing. So I was in the magnet program that bust me out of the South Side to go to Lamar. So I still had a lot of friends. And so one of my good friends from Worthing, Mike Riggs, who was the player of the year in 1992 for all of Houston, he and Floyd were good friends. They were good friends. And since I was good friends with Mike would have me go pick up Floyd, and then we would go play at McGregor Park or Sunnyside Park, or we just Nettleton Park. We'd be all through the South Side and Third Ward playing ball together, during our late high school and early college years.
So, and you there's a couple things you said there that I think are really interesting. I actually wanted to get you on the podcast before this stuff happened with George, because I wanted to hear from you. Spent a lot of time in China, and there's, with this pandemic, and there's a lot of insinuation about whether this
Oh
was
yeah.
intentional or not, and all that sort of thing. So you have experience not only with George and basketball and sports and stuff like that, but you have an experience in China. And the other thing I want to hear from you about is your experience as a Black athlete and as a should we call you a coach, or what do you consider yourself when you're taking
Sports professional.
sports professional? Okay,
Yeah.
as a sports professional, what your experience as a Black sports professional has been in China, and whether there's any differences you've noticed between maybe the way that especially Black men get treated in China versus the way they often get treated in the United States. But before we talk about that, Cyril, tell us if you remember, like, when was the first time you met George? What y'all were doing? But what kind of guy he was? Tell us about that.
Well, I just remember, because I went to Lamar, and Yates always had the reputation of the top basketball, top football, the toughest school, and I just knew that we had a preseason jamboree. A lot of high schools, they always play a couple of teams before they start, and we had Yates that year, so we had another point guard on our team that was zoned to Yates, but it was also at Lamar. He was kind of giving us the rundown. And like, man, they got this kid, Big Floyd, man. Big Floyd, he's a monster. So it just kind of put a little fear into like all the players, including myself, So we got to the gym, we played them, and we lost the game. But that was my first experience with him as a player. We really didn't get close at that time. We really got close is after, like I said, me and Mike Riggs, the guy from Worthing, he and Riggs were so tight that every time I picked up Mike, I just hit, man, let's go get Big Floyd. We got to get Big Floyd. So that just kind of started that relationship like that.
So you and I grew up. I grew up playing basketball. I mean, I played basketball basically every single day of my life for 4 straight years in high school, and I graduated in 1991. So a lot of the players that I played against were the same players you played against.
Correct.
And I remember some of these guys. Greg sounds familiar, but it was cool because in the summer I was up in Fort Worth at the time, and we were doing the same thing you guys were doing. We were looking for pickup games.
Right.
You got to go get your big man, because I was a point guard and you were a guard too. So if you want to go play pickup and keep the court and not have to sit for half an hour, you got to go get your big man. So
absolutely right.
And George was a big guy. Like how big was he?
Well, we're listing about 6'7", 230 at that time. So, more realistically about 6'6". But I mean, you even see the current pictures. He was still in shape. He was still lifting weights.
Yeah.
And still looked like he can get out there and give the Texans a little help at the tight end position. And that factored greatly into the outcome of this situation was, just how intimidating and imposing that his frame looked.
Yeah.
And just caused a knee-jerk reaction, especially when you don't know deep into the character of this person. All you can see is what's on the outside.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue. So, I grew up around big Black guys as a basketball player. I hung around guys who are 6'7", 6'8", and because I grew up like that, that was just kind of normal to me, and I never really thought anything of it. But the other night I posted this thing on my Facebook page. It was an article, and it's amazing we've already forgotten about this, but the Black guy that was watching birds in Central Park and basically got threatened on video by the white lady. I posted a story about this guy, and all I said was, man, what a nice guy, because he had basically said, what she did was not right, but we shouldn't destroy her life for that. And I got a comment from a friend of mine named Abbasi Thomas. Abbasi's a Black guy. He's 6 foot, 250 pounds. This is the way he describes himself. Mm-hmm. He says, I might as well be the human equivalent of a pit bull. Right. Here's what he said that really stuck out to me. And I want people, especially white people that are listening to this, to really pay attention to this, because I think even me, as somebody who spent tons of time around big black men. I
Right.
don't think this. So here's what he said, Cyril, and I want you to comment on this. He says, I'm 6 foot, 250-pound muscular black man. I might as well be the human equivalent of a pit bull. I have to plan when I go out in public. If I want to wait until the heat of the day cools off and go to the park at night, I have to be mindful that at the park at night, I might scare somebody. I have to make sure I have a pleasant face, smile, look not threatening. I can't have a bad day. I can't be angry in public. I can't raise my voice. And then he goes on to say some other things. And I messaged him. I said, man, that really hit home to me, because until you're in the shoes of somebody like George Floyd or Cyril White, you just don't know the kinds of things that you have to keep in your mind as a black male in this country. So talk about that a little bit, Cyril, if you don't mind.
Yes, I appreciate his statement. I was asked by a reporter of the 25 black men that I know in my professional circle, 25 professional black men that are, either playing in the NBA or some foreign league, NFL, a sports agent, basketball coach. How many have been profiled and harassed by non-black police officers? And it's 25.
Yeah.
And
100%.
we all have 100%.
100%. Yeah.
Multiple, it's like wait until one guy finishes telling their experience so the next guy can share their story. And, Will Smith recently said that racism isn't getting worse, it's getting filmed. And he spoke about how much now, even in the case of Mr. George Floyd, we both know if those cameras were not rolling, how different the narrative could be and probably would be, as we see what happened even with the initial autopsy that was in the hands of the people of Minneapolis. So, it's something that you have to keep in mind. I have a black son who was, very strong and very muscular. And, his lens is that he's socialized in a very diverse environment, coming up and growing up in private schools. It comes to a point where sometimes the lens change even in that environment, and you have to have different conversations about, hey, okay, we know we're in this certain neighborhood, but I know your buddies want to go ride skateboards and bikes at night, but you can't go.
Yeah.
You can't go. So we're going to come pick you up at that time, and just try those conversations that parents that are not black or not of color, maybe they don't have to have these same type of talks with their kids. So it's definitely a ongoing adjustment that has to be made.
Yeah. And one of the things, and man, you said a lot there. And so there's a lot of things I want to cover, but one of the things you referenced the Will Smith quote, which I had heard, things are just being filmed now, but I would add to that there's a lot of stuff going on that's not captured on video. The video is just the tip of the damn iceberg. And so what I'm seeing now, Cyril, is stuff like people saying, well, statistically, the chances of dying from a police officer are higher if you're white than if you're black. And what I want to say is, you have, if that is your argument, you have no forget about the murders. What about just the constant suspicion, the mistreatment, the planning of evidence? What about all that stuff? That does not happen in my community. I can tell you that for an absolute fact, and it does happen in the black community far more often than it should. But one of the things you said, Cyril, which you talked about the initial medical exam.
Correct. The autopsy. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And as a lawyer, when I saw that come out, first of all, in a case like this, you would expect the medical examiner to spend a little bit more time. That came out so fast. It was so rushed. This was going to be a big issue. I cannot believe they came out that fast, but there was so much nonsense in that thing.
Correct.
Like for instance, they said possible drug interaction. Like they're just basically guessing and then you have the the district attorney come out, I think it was, immediately and say, there may be evidence that this is not what it seems. And we all saw the damn thing on video. And so it looked to me and a lot of people, I think, that there was that they were starting to basically cover the thing up, like happens far too often. And that might have something to do with why there was so much anger. What are your thoughts on that, Cyril?
Well, too, just the language, like you said, saying things like it could be possibly caused by intoxication, and could chances of death increase because of hypertension. And, when you start to, whether something is true or not, when you start to make these statements out to the public, it's just a way to kind of plant that type of train of thought there.
Yeah.
And that's initially what I thought too, was it was a little bit of legal posturing and some gesturing just to kind of prepare that narrative for the other side. I knew once they brought the independent doctor in, there were going to be some different findings there, which, as there were. But, and it's one of those things where if it's lens, it's a word I use a lot, it's lens, people's lens. And because you have this lens that you said, I'm used to being around big, black, strong guys, I'm not intimidated by that. I've had many exchanges. When people have limited exchanges with certain ethnic groups, it's a lot of unknown, and it causes a lot of fear. And we both know that fear is based on ignorance. What to God be the glory is doing in George Floyd's memory is setting up some programs that can bridge those kind of gaps, tear that ignorance down, create some non-threatening situations where cops and members of law enforcement that don't normally socialize with people from certain ethnic groups can have a chance to have some exchanges through things like 3-on-3 basketball games, softball games, kickball games, where you're showing up and you're not in your uniform and you don't have your gun. And now, of course, this is going to take a little bit of preparation on both sides, to kind of set the stage to bring these groups together. But I think that's something that To God be the glory can do to honor George's memory, because I can move in and out of these circles.
Yeah.
I can move in and out of these circles. And
you and I are a lot alike like that.
Yeah,
like we can get in both of these circles, but so many people, they're just completely stuck in one bubble.
Correct. Yeah. And when you run across someone that you're not familiar to having exchanges with, well, then there's a lot of misjudgment, misinterpretation, and in this case, just total disaster.
Yeah, and so maybe one of the reasons I feel the way I do is because growing up as a basketball player, there would be times where I'd be in a gym and I'd be the only white guy. And I got treated now, of course, I was a good basketball player, that helped, but I got treated fantastically, phenomenally. And I have this theory, Cyril, that one of the root causes of black crime, police violence, and all the problems associated with that, if you really want to get down to it, it has to do with the so-called failed war on drugs. In the early 1970s, Richard Nixon, and this is on tape, when he started the war on drugs, said, we're going to do this to target the blacks and the hippies because they vote Democratic. That is on tape. So the original war on drugs was a complete and total political sham. Now, if you're going to have a war like that on a certain group of people, what's going to happen? The stuff we're seeing right now. So, until this stupid, failed war on drugs that we've wasted trillions of dollars on and destroyed the country of Mexico, until we started that, there wasn't this mentality that the cops were at war with the community, right? And so I love your idea, because one thing I think that may be helpful is exactly what you're talking about. We have to stop looking at each other. Police officers have to stop looking at certain communities as the enemy.
Correct.
These are our fellow human beings. So that is a fantastic thing that you guys are doing, Cyril.
I want to add to that a little bit about that, like as far as, go back to George Floyd. Okay. In 1998, me and George, we're both finished playing at college. He got a full scholarship, South Florida Community College. He transferred to Lee College. Okay, he was having grade issues, so he didn't play out his eligibility, but he continued to get scholarships. Now I come along and I started this touring team. We're gonna go play colleges, preseason games, okay? And so we're gonna play about 8 to 10 colleges during October, November, December. George Floyd came and joined the team because he wanted to continue playing at a high level, and we had something organized. Not only did he join the team, but he got other guys from around to come and be on the team. Guys that went to Yates, guys that went to Austin, other guys from 3rd Ward and 5th Ward. And we went out and played college. Okay, now what happened to that? Some guys end up getting college scholarships from that. And that was directly linked to George's recruitment. So now if you're this police officer, and before you put your knee on this man's neck, would you stop to consider the number and scholarship dollars that this man is responsible for steering kids down this path?
Right, exactly.
Can you account for the number of people that he's kept from getting arrested selling drugs in impoverished neighborhoods because he pushed them towards an athletic track so they can improve their lives? But you're not thinking like that. You just see a big black guy that you think can beat you up if you make him mad.
Yeah, exactly. And
you got to do so much to make him mad because he's just so cool.
Yeah.
But you don't know that, you know?
And I was going to ask you that, like, so what was George like as a person? Like, what kind of guy was he?
Natural comedian, just jokes for days. Whoever your favorite stand-up comic act is, just imagine Bernie Mac, Chris Rock, just combine them in one, man. It's just going to be a bunch of laughs. He's a big old guy, always got a story and a smile, and, you know, just something to lighten the mood.
Yeah.
I was saying this, I was telling my wife, I said, if there was any party that Floyd was at, I don't care who the party was for. If it was Michael Jordan's party and you came in the party and you looked around, Floyd was going to be standing next to Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan was going to be glad. It was going to be all good. There's a Bible scripture that says, it is better to be asked to sit at the end of the table and be asked to come to the head of the table than to sit at the head of the table and asked to move, publicly humiliated.
Yeah.
You get that?
Yeah.
Floyd was the type of guy that you would invite to the head of the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he got to the party, people saw him, they're going to ask him to come and get right in the mix.
And I want to, just to be clear, so anybody that's listening to this that may have their head in the wrong place, I want you to imagine, if you're listening to this right now, that there are 3 people on top of a man who has been saying he can't breathe and is calling out for his mom who's been dead for years, okay? And you have your knee on this person's neck, okay? And then he stops moving, and then he stops responding, and you keep your knee on his neck for another 2.5 minutes, okay? So let's just do this real quick. Imagine you have your knee on somebody's neck that is completely non-responsive, and you, starting now, that was 10 seconds. Imagine you do that for 2.5 minutes, okay? So anybody that's listening to this that doesn't think this was murder, and it was purposeful murder. This is not, and it doesn't matter, frankly, what he was accused of. He was accused of forging a $20 check or some stupid thing like that. But this was murder. And, you know, Cyril, it bothers me that there's this rush for some people when stuff like this happens to try to blame the victim, try to figure out something wrong with the victim.
Right.
The victim must have done something wrong.
Right.
Drag his character through the mud, or her character. You know, it's the same thing with Sandra Bland. I mean,
Right.
Sandra Bland's dead because some racist cop arrested her for suspicion of having a joint. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, we got to get our priorities straight here. But let's talk about Cyril. Let's focus a little bit on what kind of things that we can all do to, and you've already talked about some of these things, but what are some things that we can do to make this situation better?
You know, one thing I think everyone just needs to take a deeper take a deeper look at themselves in the mirror. And that's not to say that if you're taking a deeper look at yourself in the mirror that you're being an admitted racist, because that's not the case. Just we need
Yeah,
to do a little soul searching. It's just like you just said earlier, man. You had a lot of great exchanges, a lot of memories with a very diverse audience, but you didn't even really understand how this gentleman was seeing himself as a bulldog. Just kind of so just a little bit more empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, and being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations. Because again, what I say, this thing that to God be the glory is going to do in Floyd's memory, it's going to be some uncomfortable conversations that we have with these members of law enforcement.
for sure.
It's going to be that's why I say it's going to be some uncomfortable conversations with some of these Black guys or people from different ethnic groups that don't socialize in a diverse. It's going to be some uncomfortable conversations, but
Yeah,
this is uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable to see every major city burning,
yeah,
and military force on the street, and people asking me from China, what's going on with law and order in the USA, White? When
yeah,
are you coming back to China? Or can you come back to China?
yeah,
It's just not very reflective of the strength of our nation and
yeah,
what our reputation has been around the world.
yeah. And that one of the things that's really frustrated me, and this has frustrated me for years, and I've got social media posts that are 4 or 5 years old talking about this. But when did it become the rule in this country that Black people could only protest in a way that was acceptable to everybody else? And so, you know, it frustrates me because Kaepernick and the NFL football players tried to do it peacefully. They tried. And what happened? A significant portion of the country called them, our president called them sons of bitches.
Right.
And a significant portion of the country thought they were unpatriotic thugs and stuff like that.
Correct.
All they're doing literally is taking a knee. And you would have thought by the reaction from some people that they were committing murder. So when did it become the rule that we get to dictate how other people protest? I mean, when all these idiots with these automatic weapons went to the Michigan State Capitol, I didn't see anybody talking about their protest. And
Correct.
that protest is dangerous. I mean, they are putting potential people's lives at risk. They're literally yelling at the cops. They're screaming at the cops. I don't. The same people that are complaining about Kaepernick and the NFL players, they're not complaining about those people, and it frustrates the hell out of me. The other thing that frustrates me is it shows a complete and total lack of appreciation for American history. This country was founded on protest. We founded this country on protest, and
Correct. Correct.
I always think back. To me, it's stunning how little history people know. So, like back in the '60s, I was talking to my son the other day, and he showed me a picture of the civil rights marchers marching arm in arm, and he goes, "Dad, this is how you should protest. This is the way to do it." And I said, "Son."
Right.
5 minutes later, they were sicking dogs on those folks and blasting
Right.
them with water cannons.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. Right.
So this is like a thing that just keeps repeating. Back in the '60s, people were.
Right.
I'm so sick of people talking about Martin Luther King, and
I know.
75% of the country didn't like him back then.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. 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 That's the same. I share that sentiment.
I don't know how we. I don't. And the frustrating thing is, I don't know how we break out of this broken pattern of thinking, because it truly is a broken pattern of thinking. I mean, we look back at, you remember the Olympians who raised their hands with the black gloves.
1968,
Yeah.
1968. Yep.
We look back, most of us look back now at those people, and we look at those people as heroes. We look at, I think, was it Bob Beeman? I forget the name, Rafer Alston maybe, but And I think there was a Swiss guy doing it too. But back then, people were talking about them being unpatriotic
Right.
thugs. It's the same exact pattern, and I don't know how we break out of that, Cyril.
Like I said, it's a mindset, and that these are mindsets and ideologies that exist at the top levels of our government, and these are if it's at the top levels and it's not, these type of thought processes are not being denounced uh, at the top levels in our country, then they're just going to remain to be pervasive. Even in this case with Mr. George Floyd, and I think if Mr. Donald Trump just simply came out and said this was awful what these officers did, to put their knee on the back of the neck of that innocent man, and he came out and spoke against that and locked up those murderers, that could change the climate of this country instantly, because it would make all these angry people feel like the people at the top really care.
Yeah.
And this is something that I shared with the Floyd family here, and I want to say it here on this platform. For me, I do understand. I understand the Black Lives Matter movement. I understand it. But for Cyril White, and to God be the glory, I've always been about diversity and inclusion. And yes, Black Lives matter very much to me because I'm one of them. But I feel like we need to come together and we need to band together. And sometimes people that are on the other side, when you say something like Black Lives Matter, it makes it difficult for other people to know how to join into that.
True.
So I want to be a part of building the bridge. I'm not against the Black Lives Matter movement, but I'm here to solicit diversity in the support and diversity in how we move forward with coming up with a plan for all of Americans.
Yeah, and so my view on this, like, I always chuckle when I hear some white dude go, "I don't see race, I don't see color." I feel like saying, "Well, are your eyes not working? Are you colorblind?" I mean, I can see that you're darker skinned than I am, right? You can see that I have blonde hair. But where we need to get to the point of is we need to get to the point where that doesn't mean anything about whether you are a good or a bad person. Like,
Correct.
So that's where I think we need to get to. And I worry a little bit, Cyril, that some of the people on the extreme left side of this are what you said about Black Lives Matter, I think is great, because I think some people on the extreme left side of this debate are making it all about race. Like that's what it's all about to some of those folks. And to me, I don't see how there's really any big difference if you're making it all about race between a racist and somebody. I mean, if that's what it's all about, then to me, you're not thinking straight. So
correct.
But and the other thing, Cyril, that I've always thought is, let's say you didn't want to do it because of moral or ethical reasons. Well, just purely logical reasons. Like, why would you treat somebody different because they have slightly more pigment on their skin? It just seems so ridiculous to me. And I don't know. I'm optimistic that the younger generation is headed in the right direction. I worry that maybe a lot of this is caused by maybe our generation and the generations above us. And I'm optimistic that when the younger folks take control, that maybe this stuff will be a little bit better. What's your general feel for that?
I feel that way too. I feel that if we go up the ladder to our great grandparents and our grandparents, and we check their Rolodex of friends and how diverse their friends were, probably not going to be too mixed, probably not going to be too integrated. Yeah. So as we continue to go down the line now, like you say, we both have so many relationships, great relationships with people of color, people of all different backgrounds, nationalities. We've enjoyed a full life in that capacity, but there's still pockets in this country where people are still really segregated.
Yeah.
Either on purpose or by default.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is getting into those pockets of people and creating some opportunity. Maybe where they're not just totally fully integrating their lives, but you need to have some experiences with people that you don't socialize with all the time so that
Yeah.
they can become more human to you. And you can just, and to God be the glory, we want to create some platforms and situations where that can happen, because it all. Let me tell you, you said about the basketball court. You said I had a great time. I was talking with one of my white friends, and he supported, to God be the glory. He's been a good friend of mine. We've coached together in Little League, and we're talking about this, and he's like, Cyril, that door swings both ways. It's like that discrimination. It's like, because one time I was at a basketball court, and I was the only white guy there. And, none of the guys on the court, they would pick me up because they thought I was, dumpy white guy who couldn't play. And I said, you know what? You're right. You are 100% right. Like,
Yeah.
that is a form of that. I was like, but let me say this. As a black guy, that's probably the highest platform in which discrimination can be exacted against you.
Yeah.
You're not getting picked up for the game, man.
Yeah.
He cannot not give you a job or deny you a loan or decide to kill you in the middle of the street.
Great point.
He could just not
Great
pick
point.
you. He could just not pick you in the game. So there's an inequality even in that,
Yeah.
But again, I enjoy so many relationships with white friends. I have these type of conversations that need to be had with other pockets of white people that don't know a Cyril White or a person that really can move in and out of these circles and kind of reduce some of this fear and ignorance that exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, and it's exactly what you said. It's fear and it's ignorance. And so, I've kind of over the years, just now when I see people of my race that are racist, I just think they're ignorant. I just think the people that worry me the most are the people that aren't ignorant, the people that are intelligent people and are still racist. Those are the people that are dangerous. Most of the people that I encounter, I'll give you a quick story. When I was at A&M, I played basketball there for a little while, and then I joined the Corps of Cadets. And I was a freshman in the Corps of Cadets, and a couple of my classmates were from these. We didn't have any black guys in my outfit, and a couple of my classmates were from these little small towns, and they were using the N-word constantly. And I was like, "Dude, stop saying that in front of me."
Right.
That offends me. I don't want to hear that shit anymore. You can say it. You say it, and they looked at me like I was crazy, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "I don't want to hear that stuff." And you know what? They stopped saying it, but it wasn't that they were bad guys. It's that they were just ignorant. That's just what they heard growing up. And so, a lot of these people, I think it's just a matter of educating the ignorant people, right?
That's right. Just a little like cultural and diversity education, social awareness.
Yeah.
Ethnic education. Just like that. I laughed when you said that because I understand that's rooted in their lifestyle. Like how they grew up. They were just surprised that you didn't join in with that. They didn't even see the error of their ways.
Yeah.
And so, and same time, that door swings both ways. That door swings both ways. If you got a guy that's coming out of the inner city projects and he's gone to elementary, middle school, high school with only black people, he's never had any exchange. So when he sees a white person and all he sees is them getting killed or the cops getting called on them for selling water or whatever, then they're going to always be apprehensive. Or a white person comes through the neighborhood, like, what's that white boy doing over here? Why is he over here? That's the cop. He working for the feds. So like, no, man, like, we gotta. That's what it is. And as a guy, like you say, that's lived in China, that has a whole life in a whole other country, it's just, I really hate to see people functioning with this limited lens like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about it is if it's ignorance, it can be fixed. Ignorance can be
correct
by education. Hate, really, I don't know what you do about hate necessarily, but if it's just ignorance, all it is education. I'm thinking about my in-laws told a story years ago. They went to this super nice dinner at this country club in Houston. They get sit sat down next to this black dude and his wife. And I know who the guy is. I think he was actually an ambassador to some country in the United States. He's a very, very well-known lawyer. He's a partner at a huge law firm, very successful guy. But it was funny because my father-in-law comes back and goes, yeah, it turns out that this guy is a lawyer, and it turns out he's a partner. And he acted like I was supposed to be surprised by that. Right.
Right.
There's lots of black guys like that. Like, why is that surprising to you? But the thing was, is he just had never been around it. Like, it just, you know. And so, well, Cyril, tell us about one of the things I'm really interested in, and you and I have never talked about this, and so this will be the first time I'll hear it too. I want to hear what your experience as a black man was and has been in China, and also how the black athletes that you bring over there are treated, generally speaking. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, you know, I went to China firstly as a basketball player, right, in 1999. You know, so I was suiting up and playing in games. They treat you great. Like, when you're coming from the USA, even the word for America, Meiguo, it means beautiful land. That's the translation. Meiguo, Mei means beautiful.
Wow.
Guo is country. So you say Zhongguo, China, Meiguo, USA, Deguo, Germany, Baguo, France. So
nice.
Guo is so America is always going to be at the top. You say you coming from the USA, you're going to get paid 10, 15, 20 times more than they're paying the domestic players, and they're going to put you on a pedestal. Everything is going to be great and fabulous if you are an athlete that's a part of the professional leagues in China.
Yeah.
Now, that's athletes. There are a lot of foreigners that come to China to work on work visas, teaching English, teaching sports, coming from the US, Australia, UK, parts of Africa. I see some of the darker skinned Africans definitely get some racial treatments I've witnessed in the southern part of China.
Yeah.
Some of the darker skinned Africans. I've been fortunate coming into China culture as a professional athlete, then making the transition to a sports professional, working with other high profile athletes. So I've always functioned under this umbrella of exclusivity.
Yeah.
That kind of weeds me out from some of the things that just other people may encounter in China. So that's been my experience. Yeah.
So that's great. That's good to hear. And you know what that kind of makes me think, Cyril, is and that in some ways that's similar to the United States. We treat our black celebrities, we treat our black athletes, we treat our black musicians like gods. I mean, and you know, black culture is all over the place now. You know, it's and so, but then we don't treat the least of our citizens the same way.
Inequality.
Yeah.
I got a funny story about China real quick. I was in the elevator one day, and this older Chinese couple, they didn't know I could speak Mandarin. So they got it, and so they looked at me, and the husband goes, "Ta shi fei zhou ren." He's an African. "Ta shi fei zhou ren." And the wife says, "Ah, bu shi, ta shi bu hei." She's like, "No, he's not. He's not very dark." And then the husband goes, "没有头发。他有头发，我知道." He has no hair. If he had some hair, then I would know. And so then the elevator door opens, and I stepped back. I was like, 不是我的朋友，我是美国人. I was like, no, my friend, I'm American. And then I kind of Michael Jackson moonwalked off the elevator. Standing there looking at me like, oh God.
Oh, what a great story.
He's trying to size me up, talking about he's not black enough.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, he looks like an African. Tasha Faze already. Like, why are you tripping, man? What does that even matter?
Oh man, that is an awesome story. I love that. Well, and I think that shows that, and some people that have the skin melatonin that I do, they don't differentiate between a light skinned black guy and a dark skinned black guy. But there is discrimination within the black community
Oh yeah.
too, as well, and that's something that a lot of people in my quote community, or whatever the heck you want to call it. I don't really consider myself a member of any particular community other than the human race.
Amen. Human
Yeah,
race, baby.
yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. Like they don't see that really dark skinned brothers, like my friend Anthony Ware that I play basketball with. They get treated worse. Like they have to be especially cautious. And a guy like George Floyd, who's a lot darker complected.
That's what really did it. That's what I just kept saying. It's like, man, he's just too big and black, man. He's
Yeah.
just too big and black for people to be comfortable. Just too big and black.
You have to
And
be so careful when you're a guy like that. You have to do things and think things and act in ways that, frankly,
to make other
you and
people
me,
comfortable.
yeah, to make
Yeah.
other people comfortable. Like you and I don't have to do. You have to do that more than I do. But guys like George, my friend Abasi, they have to do it 100% of the time. Like Abasi said on my Facebook, he can't have a bad day.
Right. Say we're just gonna just work hard to honor his memory, like I keep saying.
Yeah.
Just from the time I found out about his death, I just kept thinking, what could I do? And then I start getting calls from media to do interviews, and I just kept thinking, what can I do? And I talked with his brother, and just thinking, it's so important what I'm saying about this bridge building thing, and just looking at the root of what I feel caused this problem is just this that continues to cause these problems.
Yeah.
It's just this divide between what seems to be black and white people, but it's really right and wrong people.
That's right.
It's not a battle against black and white. It's happening between
Yeah.
whites and blacks.
Yeah.
But based on a matter of right and wrong. And that's what I refuse. I refuse to let this become a thing that is about race or between races. I refuse, like I spoke about the Black Lives issue earlier. This has to be about right and wrong, and everybody that we talk to along the way, that has to be their approach. Yes, black people will benefit from this, but humanity will benefit from the world being better.
That's right. And that's what, boy, what a great way to put it. We will not get where we want to get until people that are not the victims of this are just as offended as people that are. So until people that, and I love the way you say that, because this is not, at the end of the day, it's not a black and white thing. It's a human thing. It's how are we going to treat our fellow human beings? What are we going to do when we see a community that's struggling? How are we going to react to that? Are we going to react to that with hate and anger, or are we going to react to that with love and compassion? That to me is the real question that we're looking at right now. The way you put it was even better, but I could not agree with you more, Cyril. So tell us real quick. So To God Be the Glory is your basketball program. For people watching on YouTube, there's the banners behind Cyril so you can see it. How can people support what you're doing? How can people support your efforts to build these bridges and stuff?
I appreciate that. Well, we have it set up on our website. It's tgbtgsports.com. And, you can Google search To God Be the Glory Sports and go to our webpage. We have, all of the programs. We have a tribute to George on the page there. Kind of talks about his involvement with us, what he did with us, and just kind of starts to talk about, we're going to do some special programs in his memory, of course, with his family's blessing. So, and there's a lot of other information about, what I've done in my career with To God Be the Glory. So yeah, you can take some time and spend on the webpage and tell you how you can be involved in support.
Nice. So it's TGBT, To God Be the Glory Sports Beckcom. That's your
Yeah.
program right now. Let's before I let you go, and we've almost gone a full hour, so I know you're a busy guy. I really appreciate your time, but I got to ask you this question because you probably know more about it than most. What are we looking like in terms of basketball? In the next 2 or 3 months in the fall, like, and I'm talking specifically in relation to the pandemic. Like, what are you hearing right now?
Well, yes,
Because I
sir.
miss the heck out of basketball. I got to be honest with you. I miss it bad.
I know. There's the guys. A couple of guys have been working out. Shush, right? I bumped into James Harden and Daniel House last week working out here. Austin Rivers was in the gym earlier today. So I know these guys are trying to come back. What I've heard is that they're going to do something down at Disney in July,
Okay.
like the end of July. They're talking some plans about creating a bubble, like the Bubble Boy. You remember that guy, the Bubble Boy?
Yeah.
So they're talking about putting the game inside of some bubble down on the Disney property late July. Players, they want to play, they want to get back to it, but unless there's a real plan of safety to where they feel like they can't expose their families when they return back home, some guys are still skeptical. Chris Paul, Damian Lillard, they've been real outspoken about that.
Yeah.
Meantime, guys just trying to stay in shape, and everybody's itching to get back out there. Fans are itching, players are itching.
Yeah, my 16-year-old son is going into his junior year, and he's, for basically 2 months, there was no basketball, but so he was working out at the house and trying to stay in shape and stuff. But he just yesterday went and had his first training session, and it was an outdoor basketball court with his trainer. So it looks like they'll at least be able to do some of that. But I'll be honest with you, Cyril. I'm a little bit worried that if we don't get this coronavirus under control, we may not have a basketball season for high school and college.
I believe the same thing.
Yeah, and even if we do, I can see a situation where, like, if they get fast acting tests or something, like every player, coach, and ref gets tested before every single game or something like that.
Right.
It's going to change for sure. But well, that's good news. That's good to hear that they might be doing something at the end of July. Well, Cyril, man, I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this. I'm sorry personally to you because I know you knew George, and I'm also sorry for his family. I really appreciate all the stuff you've done, both talking to the New York Times and the other media sources to let people know that this was a real human being that this happened to. And anyway, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, so thank you very much, my friend. I'm looking forward to. We got to get together before too long, right?
Appreciate it, man. To God be the glory. Thanks for having me. And like I said, man, may the memory of George Floyd be blessed.
Amen.